Hello, everyone. My name is Laura Terrell. Welcome to this month's National Foreign Language Center panel discussion. Tonight's discussion is going to focus on the TEL domain of learning tools. And what we will be doing is looking at how this particular domain within the TEL framework, one of the 7 TEL domains, looks at how we can use resources in order to deliver more effective instruction, ensuring greater learning opportunities for our students. This is the 4th in our series. There are 3 previous versions that can be found, and September's was on environment, October on learning experiences, November on planning. They were recorded and they are on the NFLC YouTube channel. We are thrilled to welcome our 4 panelists this evening. Elena, Frances, Heidi, and Barrett are all practicing teachers, and they, without a doubt, will have a very interesting and practical thoughts as we talk about learning tools. And as I said earlier, the connection between resources, how we use them, and how we really promote learning in our own classrooms. And so I would like to let them get started by introducing themselves, and then we will hear them explain how they are coping, surviving, and thriving in this most unusual year. So, Elena, perhaps you would like to kick us off?
Okay, hi, my name is Elena Kaminetsky. I teach Japanese at Eastern High School in Louisville, Kentucky. And, this year, starting in March last year, has been my first experience doing online teaching at all. And one thing I learned from this is I have so much respect now for people who have been online teaching before and who have experience doing it. And another thing I learned was that sometimes it's good to be patient and slow down when you're going through your instruction, and to sort of like let things go. And if we need more time to go over something because we're in an environment where we can't speed through things, that's fine. So
patience is key.
Yeah.
Frances, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Frances Lizette. I am a middle school French teacher at Scarlett Middle School in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I think my big takeaway too, kind of to piggyback off of you, Elena, is just to slow down and kind of prioritize the things that I'm doing and being more intentional in what I'm asking my students to do and how to produce the language to kind of make everything more effective, because we've also been online since March. So
okay,
quite different.
Heidi, want to chime in? Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Heidi Lechner. I teach all levels of German at Libertyville High School, which is in Northern Illinois. And we have been remote this entire year up until today. Today's our first day of hybrid, and well, but I would say that besides taking it day by day and at a very calm pace so that kids can learn through Zoom, student engagement has been huge this year. Just trying to keep the kids together and understanding what's going on and giving clear instructions has been very important, and engaging them at the younger levels, because for the first year they don't know each other. So it's not the seniors have been together 4 years, a whole different kind of worms.
Great. And we look forward to hearing more about your ideas for that also. Barrett, last but not least. Volume, perhaps?
Thanks. Sorry.
Perfect.
Yeah, only doing this for 10 months. And so my name is Barrett Norman, and I'm at Boise State University teaching also pretty much all levels of German, mostly intermediate to intermediate high, some advanced low. And also all remote since March. And I think for me, mostly flexibility and knowing it can all change again. It feels like we've been changing a lot. So I ended up changing a lot of expectations. But like I heard my colleagues say, really being clear with the learners, with our students at all levels has really helped. And I think I finally slowed down. I think I've always been too fast of a talker in any language. So this has been a big change, and hopefully we're weathering it. I can't wait to get back and use these tools that I'm learning, but also have my face-to-face classroom teaching again. But I'm wondering what that will look like. Next year's conversations will be quite different, I hope.
I think all of us in education are looking forward to face-to-face opportunities again, but I want to thank you all for your introductions, which just encouraged patience and slowing down and doing what you can. I think those are messages we all need to hear and be reminded of frequently. I do want to give a special shout out to Elena. She failed to mention that she is the actual Teacher of the Year for 2021. So congratulations to her. Let me then go ahead and remind everyone in the audience, if you have questions or comments during this discussion, you can post them in the chat on YouTube or in the comment section of Facebook. We have someone who's monitoring both of those sites, and then we will do our best to bring those into the conversation where they're most appropriate. And as I said earlier, we're going to be focusing on the learning domain, and each domain within the TEL framework has an essential question. And that question is really asking, how do teachers capitalize on a variety of tools in order to advance student learning? So very purposefully keeping the connection between the tools and resources and the learning goals. And so keeping that focus on learning, to get us started, we have a challenging question. And I'm going to let any of you that want to take this just chime in and jump in on it. But how do teachers use really help students process language in the interpretive mode? And you can feel free, it sounded like most of you are really working with the online environment now, but you can talk about tools and how you would use them online and or face-to-face. So do I have someone that would like to go ahead and chime in on that question?
I can start.
Okay. I can't tell who's talking yet, so I know that. Thank you, Greta. Francis.
So one of the things, so I work primarily with the novice level, like the students who are just starting their language acquisition process. And one thing I have found super helpful when I'm using authentic resources with my kids is to create activities that require good interpretive skills. So especially at the lower levels, I explicitly teach interpretive skills, like focusing on pictures, using cognates, and helping them build their confidence. So they're more willing to take risks down the road in their language process. And so I found, like, if I include questions when I'm designing my activities that require them to perhaps preview the text, to go through the activities and find cognates, because that makes them do it. And so then they're starting off in a better position to actually make more larger connections and inferences later on in the activity.
I'd like to say, piggybacking on that, something I started doing more in the virtual environment that I was not as good about doing when I was in live classes was, before we do a reading task, I always go through the interpretive questions with the students. So it's so now you know what information exactly you need to be looking for in this text. And then that helps them focus and not get so overwhelmed by the amount of stuff that they don't know. Because in any authentic text, there's going to be stuff that they don't know. And with the novices, that can be real laser focused. Like for Japanese, sometimes it can be something like, what's a character that you recognize? Or what do you think this is? If it's like a menu or something. And then, the more advanced you get, the more advanced the questions can get. But it's really helpful to always here's the question and here's the information we're going to be looking for.
I think that's a good point too. Oh, sorry. It's about the helping them figure their things out. It seems kind of like a simple task. What's the main idea? What is this thing? Helping them make that connection is really important at the lower levels, because we kind of take for granted that kids will be like, oh yeah, we know this is a menu. They've seen a menu before. But a lot of times kids are so hesitant to make that guess that you do kind of need to reassure them that what they're doing, what they're thinking is correct. And I think that is a huge part of developing that confidence at the beginning levels that'll help them make the bigger leaps later on. So
yeah, it gives them experience with success.
Mm-hmm.
I've found that in my novice level in my German 1 class, we've been using authentic resources, like a lot of infographics. The pictures are always key for the novice level. And the students are feeling, just because of the slowness of the course this semester, that they're not really getting anywhere. So I have to keep encouraging them and praising them. And it's not like we hear German in our community every day. So they're not quite sure where they stand. So I say, okay, we just had a fake final last week, as I put it, and I gave them a video and an infographic and a short article. And at the end, we went over it and they said, wow, we really do know a lot. And yes, and so I think just the encouragement and focusing on the things they do know is more important than dwelling on what they don't. Like you had said, what can they do with this text, and ignore the extraneous information.
And if I could join what Heidi just said with images too, I decided with a little bit higher level, I use cartoons then also. So the image was so important of just what, and then, but that meaning, there's a caption, and I use political cartoons, and also a lot of them are issues that are also affecting us, like with COVID and different social distancing things. But I found that was really helpful just to have the students read out my questions that before doing the work. And I was so surprised that, why don't I do this more often? The homework just kind of gets sent out and they know, but that's been really beneficial. I like hearing their voices, asking the questions before they go to do the work. So when they come back, they're much more informed, and then they go the next steps further with creating meaning, looking for cultural differences, all which is scaffolded into most of the questions I give. But that's been really helpful. And again, images are so important. Yeah, the cartoons have been fun.
Distinction. I know 3 of you are online right now. Are you making a distinction between what you're doing online and what you've done face to face? Like really that difference? Are there tools, strategies? Is some of it synchronous, some of it asynchronous? Just some things that you found that really seem to hit home if you have to differentiate the two. Heidi, you're a saint for coming tonight on the first day of both.
I was going to add, it is different this year in that I have to be uber organized, to use a little German in there. You really need to have everything either put into a Pear Deck or into a GoFormative or a Google Slides or some way that the kids can get it on their Chromebook. And we don't have any papers going back and forth. So if you just send out an article, which I can do in my upper levels, and then we discuss it on the fly, that's fine for an off day. But no, this year has been just having everything so planned out rather than in the past when you can really just photocopy something and then have a discussion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I see everybody nodding their heads. Does anybody else want to chime in?
I was going to say we've been using Pear Deck a lot this year as well. That one's been kind of helpful to kind of see if the kids are understanding things in real time and like showing their processing. And then that's a good tool for if you give them something authentic, you could have them maybe circle or underline or highlight like where they found the answer. Because a lot of times kids will randomly guess the response to something. So I'll always have them give me their answer. And then the next slide, I'll have them point in the text where you found that answer to kind of show like the justification of their responses. That's something I do a lot in my real life classroom that was hard to replicate online. And so Pear Deck has been a useful tool for kind of seeing the students processing when you can't actually like creep behind them.
Or as one student said when we were doing a student panel, you don't see the teacher coming. In the classroom, you see the teacher coming and you refocus, but when it's virtual, they might just be there. So I think they've picked up on that. Well, let's go ahead and go on to the second question then. How do teachers use resources then to actually help produce language in the productive modes, the interpersonal and presentational modes? So I'm making the assumption that you've been working with an interpretive text and now you would be moving it into the interpersonal and presentational modes. And I know that we get a lot of questions on various listservs about that interpersonal mode in particular. So if any of you have really strong strategies for the interpersonal mode in this virtual environment, I know that teachers would love to hear them.
I will say I am very big on encouraging my students to imitate, because that's how we learn languages and that's how I learn languages. And so if I know I want them to produce language in the interpersonal or presentational mode, I try to find, first the authentic text that has a bunch of the phrases, the sort of like the sentence structure, the sinew that they're going to need in order to be able to talk about the similar topic. Especially because there's sometimes, lots of turns of phrases and stuff that don't directly translate between languages. So you need to see like, how does that play out in authentic text? So like, for example, this year for my final for Japanese 3 and 4, I'm like, you guys are going to do a pandemic video diary. That'll be fun. But they didn't really sort of have the language and the phrases to talk about that out of the blue. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go find some news articles that like have the right words and phrases, like, you know, you have to do this when you go outside, or we are quarantining because blah, 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 blah. And then use that text and that phrasing right there. And I'm like, guys, you can totally crib from this. It's okay. This is the right thing to say, and this is how you say it. So I encourage them as much as possible to, you know, monkey see, monkey do, because I think that's a very natural way to learn how to use a language.
Another thing I also do with my students is showing them how to restate the question in your answer, right? Like how, you know, where is this guy from? This guy is from blah, blah, blah. Like showing them how you can, like, I know at the novice low, novice mid, we're anticipating one word answers, but I'm letting them know if you're trying to level yourself up and go towards novice high, intermediate low, the easiest thing to do is just copy what I just said and turn your thought into a complete sentence. And then too, at the lower levels, there's just tons of, like you had said, was the scaffolding, like giving them the sentence starters. If you're trying to have the students do an interpersonal conversation, we focus a lot of time on the question words, like me using them over and over. And in my real classroom, I have them posted on the wall. But that way, if kids are going through and having a conversation about perhaps their hobbies, like they can give the regular question that they've had, you know, I've given them to prompt their conversation, but then they can ask each other follow-up questions, even if it's just really short, like with whom, when, where, like they're very simple questions, but it still continues the conversation and makes it more like authentic.
Okay. For that, if I can add on, that following up with a conversation, I think is the most difficult for students to learn how to do. And rather than just shotgunning back and forth a different question, but rather building upon. So what I did with my novices that I'm really excited about a few weeks ago, we got back from break and I said, all right, one of you's in the hot seat and we're going to have a 3-minute interpersonal, so to speak, but with the whole class. And so a young lady volunteered and I said, what do you do in your free time? And then the entire 20 kids in Zoom each added on a question building upon the person in front of them. And again, like you had said, it's using the question words and all the vocabulary we've learned over the last few months, but it showed the students, oh, so that's how you have like a nice coherent conversation on one topic with 20 people.
Challenge, right? You have to listen to the answer that preceded the question you're going to ask. So yeah, I can see that with novices is a key skill to practice.
I could share a little bit. I'm lucky enough to have more of that intermediate mid to high speakers. So when we're trying to repeat phrases, I found that I'd be finding grammar phrases, something like in my opinion, that I would be using. And then they were following up on homework, but in their breakout rooms, which luckily at this level I can do that too. I know that's maybe not as easy, maybe it is, we can talk about that too. But with breakout rooms, and I give points for each group who can use the phrases the most, or if they hear someone in their group where they could use it, the idea that we could have used that there, and if they discuss the idea that they were supposed to be just discussing attributes and character traits, but as I would say, in my opinion, because it was they were supposed to be someone else too, because I'm tired of hearing their own opinion. It gets really stale after a while, so they have to have it with the new identity, or I had given them the identity they were speaking from about this character trait.
Perspective. Mm-hmm. What about picking up on what was just shared? Are you all using breakout rooms? Is that available to you? Or do you have an alternative to them? How are you getting kids to, you know, the hot seat with everyone in the class, but then what takes it into the more interpersonal small group pairs of students for you all?
I did not have breakout rooms available until about 2 weeks ago because my district was using Google Meet and then they didn't have a breakout room feature. And I'll be dead honest, I've only had 3 class meetings since then, and I have not used them yet. But it's something that I've been planning to use for a long time, and now that's available, I need to think very deliberately. It's like, how am I going to use this? I wanted it, but now I don't know how. So I'm trying to think of structured activities I can give the kids where they'll have an incentive to do it and they'll be scaffolded correctly to do it, even if I'm not there with them or I drop in unannounced.
One thing that I have found, so I teach middle school, and what we learned real quick is when we would send the kids to the breakout room, they would sit there in silence with their cameras off for 2 to 5 minutes, and then you'd come back in and be like, how was it? And they'd be like, no one talked. I was like, oh my God. So one thing that we found is I'll make a Google slide and just make copies of it and say it's like breakout room 1 uses slide 1, breakout room 2 uses slide 2, and you kind of assign it like that. And then I can sit there and watch the kids as they're manipulating or filling in the parts of their conversation. And so if I see a breakout room that isn't moving the stuff on their slide, I know to go pop in there real quick. Or if I see a breakout room that is moving suspiciously fast, I know to go pop in there and listen to their English real quick and like surprise them. So that way they switch to French and we talk about what they're supposed to be doing. But I think that was one of the big helpers for this year, was having some sort of way for me to see what the kids are doing in real time. So I know who's either struggling, whose partner isn't actually in the room, or, just that was a big troubleshooting thing that we came up with. There's another thing too. It's like a whiteboard thing that people use a lot. I can't remember what it's called.
Jamboard, maybe. Jamboard.
Yeah. That brain couldn't handle something else new. So,
and one thing I would say, Elena, we use the same this semester with the breakout rooms, is having the Google Slides that everybody shares and you can see it in grid view and keep an eye. But I would give everybody, especially at novice level, a chore or a job. So, you need the scribe and the person who's going to speak first and the person who's going to, click the button, call the teacher, or I don't know. But that helps because then everybody at the younger levels, okay, I have to do this one thing, and it helps them focus. That worked really well. The upper levels, I couldn't get to stop talking. They'd go into breakout rooms and just, be so excited to see each other because they're so cut off.
They get a little bit older. I think they know each other better. Other thoughts on that? Other learning tools that support interpersonal, or other strategies that you feel, or presentational? We should touch on that one separately also, because that's caused teachers angst also, without being able to see what they're doing, how you manage that without constant Google translation and such things. Somebody wanted to say something. I saw a hand wave and I just didn't quite catch it. Barrett?
I keep forgetting to hit the mute. So yes, I think you probably all have been using Flipgrid, but I still have found it. I was surprised at how many students in evaluations said they enjoyed the Flipgrid, because I was worried that they wouldn't want to see their faces or more. I wasn't sure. I just had my own trepidations there. So I gave the option. You have to do this recorded response to whatever the prompt was, as if you're speaking to someone or explaining someone. That was for the interpersonal, trying to explain what you've just done. And then the Flipgrid, and they had to comment on each other's and follow up, blah, blah, blah. It worked really well. I thought the students who didn't want to do that, I allowed them to do Google Voice. They had to do the same thing, but just speak to me only. So I did have one student who was consistently doing that. And I'm not sure the reason, but it seemed like that worked better for him. But so I thought, I was surprised that they really liked seeing each other in the video and the Flipgrids. I'm sure you probably have other stories, and maybe I'm not, if secondary ed is allowed to use Flipgrid, I'm not sure. I think so, right?
Yeah. Oh, we use it a lot, and the kids really enjoy it because they get to see each other's videos, and I force them to comment and give feedback, and so it's very interactive. One thing I want to comment, you've mentioned presentational, Laura. The thing that I find very helpful for making it authentic is giving an authentic audience. So when we were on lockdown in March and April, I had signed up for Grid Pals. I don't know if you're familiar with it, through Flipgrid. And what it's an e-pal basically for free. And a woman from Switzerland contacted me, a teacher, and she's like, would you be interested in being my Grid Pal? So we exchanged videos, all of our students, with Swiss kids who are also in lockdown. And we had this really authentic, fake interpersonal, more presentational, exchange. And the kids are like, oh my gosh, they're experiencing the same things I am across the globe. And so that gave it a really authentic audience, and they had a reason to express themselves, not just Google Translate, but be like, oh, this kid's going to really, I want him to know, or her, what I'm saying. So I think that helps with making it personal rather than Google Translated.
It sounds cool. Other thoughts about writing, presentational writing? I've mastered the art of silence. Thank you, Frances. All of your colleagues are thanking you.
I say one thing that I have found helpful with the presentational writing is, it's not like great, but one thing I've been telling my kids is, as they're going through and doing something, I've been giving them one thing to focus on for the ways to improve, right? How do we call them leveling up strategies. And so like, this paragraph was great. I love this. Next time you write something, I want you to use some more enhancing words. Like, say, instead of saying he's tall, say he's very tall, or he's really weird. And we give them different kind of things, like challenges depending on their level, perhaps like a negative sentence or a conjunction to do two sentences together. And so that is something that my students have like written their short little baby sentences at first. And I'm like, these are fantastic. This is what you can do next to level up. So everybody has their own little thing to be working on. And it makes it so the kids don't feel like they have to use Google Translate to try to write these great expressive paragraphs, because I always let them know too. I'm like, you're pretty much like a French baby, and I expect you to write. I would rather you write in short, tiny sentences using the vocab we've been covering and you're confident with, instead of trying to impress me with the Google. So.
How long does it take for you to get students into breakout rooms? So in case some of our audience doesn't understand what we mean by that, when you're within Zoom, you have the capacity to send students off to any number of breakout rooms. And you can have 2 in a room, 3 in a room, 4 in a room, but there is an assigning feature to that. And so we had a quick question about, how does that feel as you're doing it in the moment? Can anyone speak to that if someone hasn't tried it yet? And
there's two, I'll speak up. There's 2 different ways. You can either do the surprise method, where everybody gets randomly assigned, or a manual way where you can handpick, and that takes a little longer, but you can also pre-assign that before class and program that in. Our school, it works very quickly. It's about 20-second lag, I would say, to get everybody in the breakout rooms, but I do have colleagues in another part of the state, and it takes about 1.5 minutes, and that really, affects the entire class. I don't know, anybody here have a longer delay or shorter?
For just clarifying that question for the audience. But then maybe we'll go ahead and go on to the third question, because I think that's really a big, and Heidi, you've kind of already touched on that with, how are we providing students with those resources that support that development of intercultural communicative competence, so that it's not just language that we're working on. And I thought, Heidi, you gave an excellent example with the, I forget what you called them already, but the pairing on Flipgrid. But are there other things like that that you've found with resources that you're pulling in? Maybe even, like we've heard, some advantages to this virtual environment that you could share with the audience that focus on intercultural communicative competence?
I'll start again. I try to find resources, especially interpretive, interpretive materials, where I know that there's a question, of cultural difference that's going to this music website in Japanese. It's the Oricon website, which is like the Billboard Hot 100, but like Japanese. And they're looking through the different categories, and they will come across CD singles, which some of them don't even know what that is. And, that can lead to a conversation about how, physical media is, believe it or not, still much, much bigger than streaming in Japan and bigger than digital. And we can talk about that. Or like, recently I found a news article where it's like, okay, at shrines in Japan, because of the pandemic, they're getting rid of the hand washing stations. And that brings up the question, like, why would they get rid of the hand washing stations? And the answer is, well, what does the hand washing station in front of a shrine look like? And then we get why you would not want to do that during a pandemic. So sort of trying to find things where I know there's going to be a cultural question arising, so that we can go into a conversation about that.
We missed
Yeah, I
that. Could you just clarify what they do at hand washing stations in Japan so we don't all have to go up and look it up right after this?
So traditionally it's a fountain, and then there are these wooden ladles, and you scoop water out of the ladle and you pour it over your hand to wash your hand, and then you pour it into your hand and cup your hand and drink from it. Okay. And these places do not allow for social distancing. Like there's a whole bunch of ladles there and people are crowding around and grabbing the ladles, and everyone would touch the same ladle handle, and it would not be a super sanitary thing to do during a pandemic.
Carrie, hand washing education. Sounded perfect. Others that want to share learning tools for intercultural competence.
Well, just one German item that came up that we discussed in the spring was the airing. That's very traditional. Barrett will probably agree with me. Is the airing of the rooms. It's always good in Germany to lüften, to open up the windows every now and then. And that became a regular thing that was mandated in classrooms this year. So there's all these articles about German grammar school students who are freezing in the classrooms because they have to air out the rooms. Right, Barrett's laughing. Anyway, yes, so that was a good article. Elena, just, still with the same conversation of what are they doing there?
Well, I'm using that in class tomorrow, Heidi. That's so great. You bring it up. I'm doing a business German class, and that came up in working at home. There's a home office video I had to say, comparing, is this similar to you if you're working at home, you're a student at home? Anyway, but it came up with lüften and airing out the room, but also the windows, how they tilt certain different ways. And also there's a quote from Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, soon to be done. Anyway, she talked about the quality of German windows. So I'm weaving this little, it's been really fun just following it along that now, what do you mean there's a quality of German windows, that they're really thick and they're different? And anyway, so I'm having fun letting myself trace that, but now I'm deciding, will I do that in a breakout room or is that part of a homework in a week or two? Anyway, but it was for today or tomorrow discussion, part of it, but yeah.
That's funny.
Trying to think of more,
Yeah, going back to images that we were talking about earlier with the lower levels, I love to have the kids watch the daily news reel, Tagesschau in 100 seconds, you're going to get the whole, daily news. Well, the year 2, they're struggling because these are just native, speakers, and year 3 still even wondering. So I say, all right, let's just look at the photos because we're on Zoom, video's not always, quality is great. And let's look at, for instance, the Supreme Court over there look like bishops with their hats. They have these crazy hats and ruffs, and I don't know. And the kids are like, well, I don't know, they were talking about a church. I'm like, oh, no, let's go back and look. And so just looking at the visuals, so maybe slow it, I would never have thought of just using the visuals because we don't have enough time, but it really helped this year for the kids to come up with some cool cultural comparisons.
And we always use it, my school does a lot of the visual thinking or visible thinking strategies. So a lot of times too, when we get ready to start a unit or we're doing something, I'll throw up a bunch of pictures and do like a see, think, wonder. What do you see in this picture? What do you think is going on? What kind of questions do you have? And that one's always a fun one to do. Like when we started the school unit, showing them a real schedule. Like what's it like there? We always do the lunches, like school lunch in France is always a bummer to learn about because our school lunch is not comparable. So, but it's like things too that they will relate to, things that are relevant in their life. Like, well, if you grew up here, what would it be like? What do you think about that? How does that make you feel? And just kind of like drawing connections and things like that is always interesting for the kids too, just, even at the baby level.
That might be something as all for intercultural competence, the idea of what children do at school in any other country too. Just that we see images of children going to school on their own using subways or streetcars and other things, and that might be just another thing too. Like imagine your daily commute if it weren't your parents just dropping you off with a car. What would it be like? And then maybe even Google Maps, if you trace, this is where, if you have your grid pals in Switzerland, that would be awesome, Heidi, to say, here's where they live, their school's over here, how do they get there? Is it biking or walking, or is there a bus? Something else?
Question. The video that you both mentioned as German teachers, of course somebody wants to know, where is that video and how do they find it? So is it something you can pull up off the top of your hat and how are you? I know I was going to ask this as a follow-up question. So while you're thinking about that, let me throw that in. Are there some absolute favorites in your language, like your go-to places to find these things? Because you know how often you get asked and how long it can take to find the perfect. Thank you, Barrett. She's posted the link to the video in the sidebar. So I know somebody's going to appreciate that. You've given them their lesson plan for the near future. Other thoughts about just where do you go to find these resources that are giving you this intercultural perspective? What are your tips for getting there and finding them?
Yeah, I'll start, Laura. A lot of people ask me that in workshops because they get so overwhelmed if they're not sure where to go. So what I do is I have a couple different news stations installed and newspaper apps on my phone, and I get the digest form sent to me, and I just skim it every morning, and I get a lot of videos or interesting articles or even just a little meme or something, but a new word. And so just 15 minutes in the morning, it will give me an idea, or I'll stumble, like I showed the Sissy movie. I don't know if you're familiar with Sissy in France, did a part of an Austrian unit, and I stumbled across, oh, it's the 65th anniversary. Well, there's a perfect newspaper article for us to do an interpretive today. So I think just being aware of what the key resources are that you're familiar with that work. Like, for instance, I don't use Build, which has a lot of naked photos in it. So that's not really a place to send the students, you know, even though the language is easy.
I'm a cheater, and I join a lot of Facebook groups. And so sometimes, too, there's just people who will post authentic resources that they found, or if I'm looking for a specific thing, you can always search there. So it's not like super helpful, but if you can find language-specific Facebook groups, that's a good place to cheat. Also, little kid news. So because we're novice, I do Un Jeune F2 for French, and it's like, it's cute. They do little videos and newspaper articles. But what I found is, like, if you, instead of, I can't look at like grown-up news, or I guess I could, but like I find like the younger ones, and it covers the same topic in a more simplified language, and that's been really helpful.
That's exactly what I was going to say, because I rely, for Japanese, I rely so much on the NHK Easy News website, which it has short articles. It has pronunciation guides for the Chinese characters, which is super important for Japanese learners. And there's an audio function. So you can click and hear any article, and it's great. So whatever the equivalent is in your language, some sort of like accessible news website or easy news website, you can mine forever and ever and ever.
The news sites then are very current. And you know you're getting current events into the classroom and current language in the perspective. Are there any other thoughts you want to throw in there about intercultural? How are you knowing that your students are getting better at it? How does that come through in a virtual world? I mean, do you get any indications from them that they're picking up on this, or do you have a way of finding that out?
I do have an intercultural piece on my rubric where they're supposed to show growth. We failed miserably this semester. I have to say, not a lot of growth in the intercultural competency. I don't know. I'm going to be honest there. The kids are struggling just to make language happen over the internet and come to class on time and do their best just to be there. So I figured, you know what, I'm teaching it, and I'll assess it when we're back together. I don't know how you'll feel about that.
Other reactions?
A lot of if it makes you feel any better, my intercultural competence has come through English discussions. So maybe not like super great. I know it's supposed to be 90-10, but right now, just trying to get like that wow factor for the kids, like showing them what it's like in other places, and then having them feel like asking questions and stuff. I think just kind of maybe their interest in learning about what it's like in other places is kind of the step that I'm happy we've gotten this year. The bar's a little lower, I feel, but just like showing them what's different, having them kind of making connections to their life, and then wanting to know more, you know.
Big realism.
Yeah, something I started using English in the chat in my virtual meets while I'm showing something authentic. And for the novices, I think that was really, really, really helpful. Like one class, I just showed the short little, it was some high school students like video diary, like here's my day at school, you know, and then in the chat in English, I was posting like, what is she doing? Why is she doing this? What do you think? And then the students were responding in English while they're watching the Japanese video. And that's something that I would not be able to do simultaneously like that in the live classroom. And I thought that was really fun. It seemed to really engage the students, and they learned something while being exposed to Japanese while using English. So, and I'm zen about that. I can accept that.
And actually, you know, ACTO would say it's okay. It's even better in some cases to really use English to check comprehension at the novice level. So I think you're right on. You know, two of you, though, went back to your opening remarks about it's okay to do less. And I wonder if you just have a little bit more you want to say on that officially, just to maybe give some grace to people out there who are thinking they're still trying to do everything that they did in the former reality. So it seems that some of you have come to peace with this decision, and you might want to share your wisdom.
If I could comment again, sorry for commenting twice in a row, but I had an incident actually earlier this year with my third years that I was teaching them something new, and this is something that did not take a long time for them to master in previous years, and they turned in like their homework where they were supposed to be using it, and it was just like sort of a spectacular failure. Like I didn't teach it correctly, they didn't get it, and I was thinking, okay, we're going to go back and do it again next week. And this is the reality I'm in. We're like, if this were in the classroom, I'm like, we're going to do it again tomorrow. But no, it's going to be, we're going to do it again next week. And then next week, it was better, but I didn't feel comfortable moving on yet because a lot of the students were still struggling. So I'm like, okay, next week, we're going to do another activity using the same thing. It was potential form. And the third week, they got it. And I had a moment where I was grading those assignments on a Friday and thinking, I just spent 3 weeks covering something that even with the difficulties would have taken me 3 days in a classroom. And I guess I'm incredibly lucky that I teach all 4 levels of Japanese in my school because I know that exactly what the students aren't going to cover this year. And we can just pick up where we left off last year. And I'd rather that they learn the thing before we move on to the next thing than me forcing myself to stick to a curricular map that no longer reflects the reality of what we're doing.
And I'll underscore that. I think the learning, as you said, as long as the kids are learning, it doesn't have to be fast. And I realize that same thing. I've been repeating myself. We only meet 2 or 3 times a week, depending. And same thing. It can take weeks to just get through one topic. But as long as they succeed on the other end, then I'm okay.
I think one thing I've been focusing on too, I mean, I guess it's much easier to do in real life school, but like just the element of it having fun and enjoying the language, I think is something that I was taking for granted, because in the real classroom, there's so much conversation. It's a very dialogue driven environment. And then online, it was so different, and there was such a learning curve trying to get the kids to produce the language. And I'm just trying to make sure that we don't lose that element of joy in the classroom, because that's what kind of makes the language fun. It makes it not into like another math class or something. Sorry, math, but when the kids normally enjoy coming to your room and getting to try something new and getting to learn things to say and use with their friends and in their classmates, wanting to make sure that instead of trying to power through everything, that we learn things well, we practice working with each other. We play a lot of games still. I've learned how to do more games, and just, using the slow down and let the kids have fun. So that way next year when we're back and things are better, that they'll be excited to come to class, and then, just hopefully have some things in their pocket.
Mm-hmm. pick up where they're at and just keep moving forward. I mean, that's kind of where we're at. It's what we have to do. So maybe this leads us into our last question, and it might not be quite the right question, just having listened to all of you, but if we're thinking about that last question that we were going to do this evening, how do you provide students with tools and those processes to reflect on their language growth? And I heard one of you say earlier, I don't remember who it was, that said they didn't feel like they were learning. So there's obviously that concern on their part, but I also heard some tips of encouragement. I think it was you, Frances, talking about leveling up. So that shows there's processes in place to reflect on this growth. And then maybe as part of this question, are they giving you feedback about what works and doesn't work in helping them grow? And it might be really interesting if you could channel your students and share what you know, but also what you've learned from your students in this whole experiment that we're in right now. So you're all nodding, but I don't know who wants to take this one first.
I could jump in. I know some students were saying they really get more out of when they have to talk and explain things. So I've been trying to create more role plays, even as part of the homework, like do this interpretive work so that you're able to speak, but then making it fun and throwing something interesting in. Sometimes it falls flat. I keep finding that. But how I hear them learning or see that in the writing is a little bit more just confidence and expanding out in more directions, maybe using different word choices or just speaking more. And that's been enjoyable. But yes, in writing, obviously we see the changes there, but we do it in draft form. I'm hoping they're getting more confident in writing. But yeah, overall, this has been just such a different experience. So I thought I'd stop here. I think the rest of you probably have more to say there. But.
No, I'll jump in. Student reflection and peer feedback are near and dear to my heart. I've been using that for the last few years. My students will roll their eyes if they heard me right now because it's built into everything. Every assessment has the rubric and a self-reflection. The kids walk away having an idea right there of how they did. When we're working on, for instance, interpersonals, we spend a lot of time practicing with all different partners and giving peer feedback. And then the students who did the interpersonal will say, my one goal for the next time is this. And then they have to do another round and just listen. Did they use those level up phrases? Was that their goal? Or was it to speak more fluently or use 6 more vocabulary words? I don't know, they come up with their own goals. But I still use that this semester. And I think that making students responsible for their learning is important. Even if it is, at a slower degree than what we've done, it is still there and the students are learning, oh yeah, I have grown and I am showing, that I'm learning new things. So. And as for feedback, I always ask for feedback. I'm always looking for new ideas. And it's kind of funny, at the novices, about 2 months ago, I sent out a form. Well, half the class would like me to continue doing what I'm doing, and the other half would like to work alone. And I said, all right, well, this is not an individual course. It's a talking language course. And so we giggled about that. I offered to print things off that I could leave at the school. No, thank you. We'll just stick to our Google Classroom. So yeah, there was a lot of surprising, result, nothing earth-shattering, but just in that sense. So I highly recommend that you ask the students also about your sound, your video, if you're online, whether they like your dorky songs. I don't know about you all. I'm sure you all have lots of dorky songs. I was told to cut back, just put them in the breaks for now so we can walk away in the bathroom breaks and I'll listen. So no more dancing, I was told online. I'll have to wait till next year.
I think too, I love student reflection is huge, and it's something I make the kids do, and then I also make them reference it when we're doing our next activity. So like if I give them feedback or if they've gotten peer feedback, we will use feedback trackers, or I will have them post on a discussion that like they can't see with each other. So that way it's just easy for me to go back and have them access it. But before we do an activity, I'll be like, okay, let's go back and look at what goal you had set for yourself the last time we had done a writing activity, or what was the one thing I gave you on your feedback to include in your new writing or your new conversation, so that way you are leveling up. Because I found that I was giving the feedback, but if I never took the time to reference it before the next activity, they weren't using it, and it was just like a waste of my life and my Saturday. So I've started to be more intentional, having them go back, see what their feedback was, and then make sure they include that in their whatever we're producing the following time. And that has been really helpful, having them actually, like, what did you have to do? I had to do this. Did you do it? And they're like, oh, I'll be back, and going and adding what they're supposed to do. So that way it's not on me anymore. It's on you. Go through your writing, find out where you find this, and then, implement it well. Sometimes too, I'll keep rambling if you want, is I'll show a video or do because it's so hard to find good authentic resources. So sometimes I'll reuse the same video or infographic later in the unit. And at the beginning, you're like, okay, what words do you hear them saying? Like, what, can you get from this? What's happening? And then later in the unit, have them do the same video, but with different questions. And then they'll see how much more vocabulary they can interpret. And they'll be like, oh my goodness, I do know more things now, because at the beginning they were saying hello, and that's all you could tell. And by the end, you could hear that they were introducing themselves and talking about other things or going over their schedule or whatever. But just letting them even see their own progress with the same resource is also great, because you don't have to find more things.
If no one else is going to jump in, I'm going to ask you a question, because I think some teachers would be saying, how in the world are you keeping your middle schoolers organized enough that they can go back and find the previous feedback that you've given them? You might want to share that strategy with everyone.
Well, there's two ways. I tried to do at the beginning of the year the way that I do it in real life school, and it was cute, but it wasn't like efficient use of my time. It's I usually have a feedback tracker where in real school they would circle it, and then before we do the next activity, they would look at the thing, and then it was like a paper visual representation. What I have done is I've had the kids send me use Schoology, send me a Schoology message telling with a little reflection piece, what was the feedback you were told to use? What was something that you needed to focus on the next time? Do you have any questions on this? And then when we did our next activity, which was the summative, it was okay, before you turn in your thing on their checklist, on their summative, when you think you're done, go back and look at your email, look at your sent message from me. Did you include that feedback in your writing and stuff like that? And just because they don't send a lot of emails because they're terrible at it. So it's easy for kids to go back and find stuff in their sent box. So that was one thing I had also done before, where we had just had a discussion where I didn't have the kids' answers posted where others could see it, and so it's just like a wall essentially, and they would just have to type their reflection answers there. And so when we did our next activity, part of the steps at the beginning was go back and look at your feedback. What do you need to do? And they would type it right on their activity. So that way, when they got to the end, they had it right in front of them.
Did anyone else have something they wanted to chime in on? If not, I'm going to ask you a wrap-up question. So I would just be curious if you had a mantra around this concept of learning tools and the resources we use and the connection to learning. Is there something you find yourself just reminding yourself of over and over again, just to keep yourself focused in these different times?
It is what it is.
I like that one. It is what it is. That's a good survival one. See, I only ask this question so I can keep them in mind myself. Anyone else want to chime in?
Engagement is the first step for learning.
Okay.
So if it hooks their interest, that's, necessary. Not sufficient, but necessary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I like motivation follows action. It's something it's a little bit higher for, just the idea that once you start doing something, then that action gets easier too. That if you've done the action, then you're a little bit more motivated to continue. I try to tell students, don't let it pile up. Please do the work regularly, more often than just once a week.
I like that. Motivation follows action. That's a good thought. Yeah. Heidi?
I think I
You
already
said the
mentioned.
last word.
Yeah,
I'm
I
sorry.
think I told you mine at the beginning. We're just going to speak some German and have a lot of fun this year was my motto that I told all my courses at the beginning because it takes the pressure off. I said, we're just here to learn German and culture and speak with each other. And if the Zoom dies, your Zoom dies, something, the cat walks by, don't worry about it. That's the least of our worries this year.
Oh, the pets in the pictures are the best, right? That's good for the fun and hooking their interest in everything. Well, I can't thank you enough for joining us tonight at the end of, I know, what are really long teaching days for you. And I know that those who joined us tonight and who will listen after the fact will get some tips from all of you. And we're just so lucky to have people like you in the profession who are out there making this new experiment work. And I really hope that as educators, we all learn lots from what we're all doing right now. So thank you so much and have a really good evening. I'll just say goodbye to all of you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye now.